Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello everyone, and welcome to Bouncing Back, the Personal Resilience Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I am your host, Joanna. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to Bouncing Back, our personal resilience podcast. I'm your host, Joanna, and before we get started today, I just wanted to say Happy International Women's Day. I know when everyone's going to be watching this, it'll be past the date, but I hope everyone's had a lovely day today. And for today's topic, we are going to be chatting about our belief systems and transforming fear into empowerment. And we're going to be talking about our spiritual and emotional well-being. So joining me today is our guest, Violet Sheena Rose. Violet comes from a background of birth and postpartum work, and she also works in well-being and provides services like Qigong. I hope I said that right. Hi Violet, how are you today?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Happy International Women's Day.
Oh, thank you. You too. I love how we're doing this today of all days.
Awesome.
So perfect. Before we dive in, would you like to tell me a bit more about your work and what you do? I know you've been on another show, but you're back now on this show.
Yes, very exciting. Well, I kind of do link together because my services and I guess my personal interests are all about well-being and emotional health, mental health, spiritual health, and just, I guess, well-being in general and how we live our lives. So I do mainly work with birth and postpartum families and also life beyond. So also, general health support. So doing Qigong, which is very much like Tai Chi, is a real beautiful daily practice for me. And I love sharing that as a Qigong teacher along with meditation. I think it's just a great way to integrate good health practices in your day as well.
Beautiful. And we've got a section called Have You Met Violet? So as you know, I'm sure you might remember, we ask you some little get to know you questions. So maybe they've been updated now since the last one we did was probably almost a year ago. So maybe you've got some new answers. So we'll find out. Do you have a favorite book?
Oh God, I'm a bit of a bookworm, but I picked one for today. It's The Divine Matrix by Greg Braden. It's like bridging time, space, miracles, belief, and it's all evidence-based and lots of experiments within the book about life, connection to ourselves and the world. It's a really inspiring book, so I keep going back and reading it again and again. So yeah.
That sounds really deep.
Well, I think I like to ask those questions that not many people do, I guess, or it's not as sort of sought, I guess. But I enjoy just looking at those things that are beyond, I guess.
Lovely. And in terms of movies, do you have a favorite movie?
I do, but if it's okay to talk about a program that I've been watching.
Yeah.
I haven't watched many movies recently.
That's okay.
I've watched The Good Place, which I'm really addicted to.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it's actually all about moral philosophy and what happens to us when we leave this earth life and being a good person versus being a bad person and what that looks like, what does that mean, and how we can better ourselves through village support. It was about this group of 4 people that kind of came together.
Yeah.
And they're all from different kind of cultures and backgrounds. And it's just a real kind of fun adventure, but also had some real great, meaningful ideas and questions that were asked, which was very exciting for me. So I'm a bit addicted to. I must have watched it like 5 times over now.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I really enjoy it.
Is that the one with Kristen Bell?
Yes. Yeah, she's one of my favorite actresses.
Yeah, she's great. I remember my brother was watching this about like a year ago and I was like, wow, this is a really interesting concept. And he was like, yeah, you have to watch it.
It gets addictive.
Yeah. Well, I haven't watched it, but I probably should now. It sounds really great. Beautiful. So moving on, are you listening to any podcasts at the moment?
I'm not.
That's okay.
But I have listened to, the most recent ones have been from my postpartum teacher, Julia Jones from Newborn Mothers Collective. And it's all about kind of, parenthood, but also like how we deal with navigating through challenges, our health, our well-being, and mental health, emotional health as well. So there's sort of short snippets and not sort of long podcasts, which is nice when you're driving about or doing things.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I normally when I'm like heading somewhere and I'm curious about a topic, I'll just find that like episode on Spotify, just chuck it on. It's a great like way to make my commute a bit more entertaining. Yeah, great. Well, I've got one last question here for you, and it is, do you have a role model?
I'm inspired by some of the teachers that have taught me things, but it's similar to if you ever watched my last podcast or heard it, I said that, and it sounds really cheesy, but myself as a role model, because, life is such a big lesson and a continual lesson. So for me, I think through all the sort of hurdles and chapters of my life and all the learnings, I think I take that as, I did that, I overcame that, and I'm here. So that's kind of been my kind of inspiration, I guess, if you like, if you call that role modeling, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I haven't actually heard that answer before, but I think that's so valid. I think it's so important to look within yourself as well for the inspiration you need, because we often look externally and we don't always look within. Great. Well, I think we can dive right into today's topic. So my first question for you is, what is the concept of the shadow self?
Okay. It's actually much broader than we realize when we talk about shadow self, because words we often are affected by, language, labels, boxes that we put things in. But how I interpret shadow self, and it's been discussed many times, especially recently in Australia, but the other aspects of self that are unseen, unheard, unrecognized. Usually we're talking about the deep subconscious, so the unconscious mind, which operates deep within, right past all those layers of what we do on our day-to-day basis. And generally that connects to, I guess, our sense of self. And well-being. And if I could just talk for a moment a bit more on a deeper level about shadow self, or about self as a whole, it's more about, I guess, our ideas and our beliefs and our programming, and that comes from our childhood. And there's so much science about children in the first 7 years of their lives usually pick up on their ideas or their dream of life, what it should be, and their behaviors and patterns they connect and collect from those that they're around. So parents, grandparents, teachers, other children, media, and all those things around. And that sort of conditions, I guess, the mind and the energy to be or to behave in a certain way, because we start to learn what's, I guess, acceptable and what's not kind of acceptable. And that kind of then becomes our kind of, I guess, set programming until we grow older and we become adults. There is ways of accessing that, but it's like our main kind of sense of self, I guess, in a way. And it's usually so far away in our unconscious mind. We're not always active in knowing always what that is, but it does affect our behaviors and how we react to things, everyday situations, trauma, our relationships, and all those types of things. What happens is, and because we live in a world that's full of fear and there's a lot of conflict and dilemmas, and sometimes we're fed those messages, and this is probably more common than not, about what is, I guess, worthy or deserving, or what is, how we should be or how we should behave, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something that humans go through.
Yeah.
But what happens is, on our day-to-day, like at work, for instance, or something, we have things that are given to us that we do, and we get more absorbed in the physical doing. But then there's the inner knowing that we don't always get a chance to reflect on, because it's a busy world where we're always doing something, and the pressure has always been on being independent and, kind of survival mode in some ways, earning, paying bills, feeding ourselves and getting by sometimes. It's different for everyone, of course. But what happens is then we have this inner dialogue of, this doesn't feel right if something's coming up for me. And we have this divide of what we feel versus what we have been told. Our conditioning has kind of given to us, which we're not always aware of. We're not always consciously aware of, oh, I've been conditioned this way. We just don't operate that way. But when we do get a chance to reflect on a deeper level at some point in our lives, we do start to pick up on a pattern. So the shadow self generally connects to that deeper part of, I guess, longing and yearning, the unseen, unheard aspects where there is some desire for change, but it goes against the ideals of what they've been taught, the conditioning and programming, if that makes sense. I hope I'm making sense there. But
yeah, that does. Yeah.
So that kind of divide happens within ourselves and creates what we call, I guess, the shadow self. But it's just those parts of us that aren't always easily able to be expressed or accepted by society or others because of their ideas, which are often imposed on us as well as individuals.
Yeah, interesting. And in what ways do you think embracing our shadow kind of selves or our shadows lead to a sense of empowerment?
Well, there's so much. So no pathway is going to be easy. When it comes to self, we don't often, and we're probably not always taught, especially in the generations before, to really look at our well-being as a whole. Especially the generations before, like, for example, my parents, I'm not going to say how old I am, but the older generations tend to, and, love to them. We learn and we evolve every generation that keeps, being born and created, and everything keeps changing a little bit. But from before, we're taught from our, I guess, and I'm probably connecting to generational trauma or that type of thing, or programming, is not to deal really with emotional health and not to deal with other aspects that are a bit more, I guess, time consuming. Obviously, our families from before have been around about the time of war and things like that, where it's always been just get up, go, do, and not being able to really access the deeper part of the subconscious.
Yeah.
So I guess the way to get towards that empowerment and knowing more of self is just having that idea of there is more to me than doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And it's really about our perception of self, and that can only be done over time and experience. And usually what will trigger that will be a traumatic experience. And by trauma, I don't mean like car crash or things like that. Nothing really big. It could be anything that plays on the mind that is a grievance, or something that plays on the mind constantly. And like for me, for example, I've had something that's troubled me for about 7 years now, and I'm only just coming to terms with it. So it's not going to be a quick journey to empowerment, but I think the start is just having a question to oneself and thinking, something's feeling a little bit, I want to explore this. And it's not always as easy as sitting down and being like, right, I'm going to look at my feelings.
Yeah.
Because you can't write it down. You can't put it in the table. And I think it's terms of finding how you like to express yourself. It could be art expression. It could be drawing. It could be talking to a friend. It could be finding a therapist or a new activity. And that triggers a new kind of learning on neuroplasticity in the mind, in the brain, and wanting to learn more about what it is that you're learning, but also yourself, because it does connect. And I guess going back to your question, I think it's the empowerment comes from acknowledging there's the beyond.
Yeah.
I think is the first thing, because it's quite complex, the journey to empowerment. And I think we have to be fixed to be somewhere where we feel empowered. But I think the empowerment comes from just acknowledging there's something beyond more what we see. There's not just, I guess, how I would describe it is one dimension, like having a flat piece of paper. It's all the aspects around ourselves that I guess make us whole. Yeah. Without sounding too cheesy, but yeah.
No, yeah, I agree. And I find it really interesting how it is moments of grief or like sadness or like going through a hard time that prompts this kind of growth and prompts us to unlock different sort of levels and experiences within ourselves. It's like, why can't that just happen while we're happy or while things are going well for us? And it's really interesting how we have to go through hard times in order to, explore different parts of ourselves. And I guess that's what resilience is as well.
I think also it's personal drive, but also we're told that anything that is questioning or challenging a said system or a said idea, which is the most common, for example, get up, go to work every day, you're fine. But it's like, but it doesn't feel fine. And just little things like that, we feel we can't speak up and say, even though we want to, and we know there's not really any real reason that stops us. But however, we're conditioned to feel like, no, it's kind of in my head. No, I'm going to just, I'm just going to keep going. And then that causes that shadow self to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And like, hi, I'm here. I want to have a conversation, however that can be. Not necessarily talking, but some form of exploration.
Yeah. And what techniques would you recommend to tap into, our shadow selves and have those conversations with ourselves?
It's all right. There's so many techniques. And look, everybody's on an individual journey. And I think techniques can be, I think we feel like we want a quick fix to things, and that's the culture we live in and our perception of self. So I think the technique or tip I would say that's most important is just having a different perception of self first, and knowing that, we're on a forever journey. It's not going to be like, right, I'm going to have the answer to this now.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, for example, in The Good Place, if anybody's watched that, they went through so many different dimensions to understand what it means to be, a good human being, and also how valid our feelings are. And I think that's an important thing, is how we understand our mental health and our emotional health, because we're often taught that if you have mental health challenges, then there's a stigma around that, right? Or depression. And depression, how it's been defined to me, is that you're not living your life authentically or joyfully and feeling fulfilled, is all really that is. And I think it's just having that time out to yourself to really think about what it is that you want. And quite often we don't always get that chance to look into what we really do want, and how we want our life to, I guess, play out. And sometimes we feel we have to stay stuck in a time or a place because of, for example, our marriage, or, for example, what our parents dictate through their culture, or, for example, what society say. So I think it really starts with the questioning, and then having some time out. And doing something joyful to just replenish, because, I'm sure you probably relate to this, when you're everyday slog and then the weekend comes and you're really exhausted, or you're out doing the opposite and just, really busy doing something else. You don't always get that downtime to just check in and connect to, I guess, our bodies. So like movement is a really important thing, because mind and body connection is a way of connecting to the inner self. We don't realize that there's actually a real big the psychophysical association, which we forget, like when we're hungry, or, if we've seen a wound on our finger and like, it could have been there for hours or whatever, but when you've noticed it, now I can feel the pain. Yeah. There's this direct connection. So anything that involves connecting to the body and your energy, and just having some time out, like whatever that might be. It might be yoga, it might just be sitting and doing nothing, it might be going for a walk, might be spending time with people that are like-minded. But I think it's just, that's a starting point, because I didn't want to go down the whole road of all these other techniques, without exploring too much just yet. But I think it's important to just have a sit back and just review where you are in your daily life and your goals, I guess, where you want to be versus where you are kind of right now, feeling like you might feel stuck or limited somehow.
Yeah. Definitely. And we don't often give ourselves that time to sit and reflect, or like sit and think about things, because we think we constantly have to be on the go.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is very important. And like, having been someone who's spent a lot of time recently thinking about things and like spending a lot of time just like on my own, it's really different to when you're growing up and you're always spending time around your friends, or you're always doing something. It's a very different sort of period of time in your life when you do start doing those things.
Yeah, I think certain times in your life when you do reflect on things more, especially the older we get, especially if we've had children. I think especially childbirth, and specifically for me with childbirth, and a bit of science here, but we get a chance to evolve just that little bit more, because the size of our cortex thickens quite drastically for 2 years. And that really gives us a lot more intelligence in a way. So then that's when we stand back and we reflect a lot more on our boundaries, and we can access more of our limitations. And this certainly happened for me. And before that, when I had quite a serious sickness, I had a chance to review, like, oh God, I could see why I actually got sick, because I was just literally running ragged. I didn't have time to deal with the disease that I had. I didn't even know, because my mindset was on work and money and achieving goals, and I barely had any fun. So just having that, things happen for a reason in our lives, and they're not usually the best things, but we get to review limitations, which is usually where the struggles come from. And the shadow self is trying to say, hey, I'm here. Don't ignore me. And then, we go on travels, a long journey, probably for the rest of our life to find this, I guess more deepened version of ourselves and evolve through small ways, which have a really big impact.
Yeah, certainly. And I love this phrase of the universe has a plan and that plan is always in motion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's like always something happening and everything's happening for a reason, but it's for something you can't see yet.
Yeah.
Whether it's going to happen in a few months or in a year or in 5 years, you don't know, but it's always in motion and it's always happening for you, not to you, is something that helps me feel better when you do get to a stage in your life where you're forced to reflect more or you're forced to think more because something has happened. And it's very interesting, but it's a form of comfort, I guess, if you are going through that in your life. And you just need reassurance that it's all happening for a reason. And you just need a bit of resilience and the ability to bounce back through all these things happening in your life.
And I think it's also taking off the pressure of, I guess, others' beliefs as well, and what we're told, especially, be happy because, you're alive.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Probably touching on one of the questions you might ask me in a bit, but Brené Brown talks about, everybody knows who Brené Brown is, right?
Of course.
Courage and vulnerability and shame and empathy. But the really important thing I don't think we realize is that we feel scared to be vulnerable, but actually we've perceived vulnerability as being weak because we've been told that for whatever reason. And actually that's untrue. It's actually our strength. And that's what I mean about perception, it being our empowerment, our mindset changing to actually, no, it's okay to be feeling how I feel. I don't have to know exactly why I'm feeling what I feel, but this is how I feel.
Yeah.
And often we feel scared that we're going to stay stuck in whatever emotion that is, because again, we're taught we can only be happy, smile and nod, and everything will be okay. And then that becomes toxic in itself, which then creates more shadow self with this inner dialogue conflict going on. And the trauma then kind of goes on a cycle and just gets bigger and bigger and bigger until we sort of have a look at it. And again, just being vulnerable with oneself, and which is not easy to do. And there's lots of support out there, and there's lots of avenues. Not one size fits, all at all. But it's just the idea that, we are beyond, this one-dimensional self of being X, Y, Z, which is what we've been taught all this time to be or do, and to just get on with things. So
yeah. And that kind of like segues into my next question about self-compassion. So
yes.
What role does that play in this process while you're striking a balance between, positive self-talk, but also exploring this shadow self that you've got going on in the background?
That is huge, self-compassion. Like, it's not easy to do. It's really not easy to do. And I think, and this is where Brené Brown's videos is absolutely excellent when she talks about empathy, because we think empathy is sympathy. And sympathy is very different. In sympathy, we say, oh, well, for example, with when I was sick, well, at least you didn't die.
Yeah.
Or at least, you had your daughter. And it's like, yeah, that's good. However, I still feel this. And it doesn't provide any, I guess, support. And like you were saying at the beginning, we look for that external support, but we're not always going to get it, because people do want to help us. They have the great intentions, but they don't know how, because everybody's education is different. Not to say they're limited as such, but we feel limited in the sense, something still feels really off for me. So the self-compassion comes with, that's okay, but let me just look within here. Okay, so this is how I'm feeling. And when we get to explore our own feelings, for example, for me, I've been journaling, and I really just I have that conversation with myself, what's going on for me, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Yeah.
And being able to have that conversation, I mean, you can express in different ways, artistically, ceramics, whatever other way or form, or even dance, other somatic experiences and support services as well. But just being able to express that somehow over time, and then find like, I I feel there's this kind of release. And then once you sort of figure out what your limiting kind of, I guess, idea or belief is, and that it's not really you, and you find out more of what you want, because you know what the other thing is that you don't agree with, you start to then have that acceptance, and then the empathy starts coming in, and then this self-compassion starts to organically happen. It just cannot happen straight away. It just has to go through the process of really going through what we need to be aware of as the problem or issue or thing that's held us back to make us feel, you know, whatever that is, grief, anger, frustration, all those other emotions we don't really get encouragement to share.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what kind of helps me personally is like when thoughts arise, learn to like observe them and not sort of like judge yourself for thinking them. Because I mean, I'm by no means good at doing that myself. I'm still learning.
I am too.
Yeah, exactly.
Always going to be learning.
Yeah, because like you have a thought that comes into your head and you're like, oh, why am I thinking that? That's bad Joe, or bad for thinking that, you know. So, and you beat yourself up for it, and then we don't practice that self-compassion of I'm thinking that, it's okay, it's just a thought. I don't actually have to pay too much attention to it and make it who I am, especially if it's a negative thought or something you don't want to be thinking. And that's where getting good with sitting with yourself and reflecting can really help, I think.
And I think what you touched on a few things there as well, a couple of things I wanted to talk about, but the idea of emotions we often run away from. We often feel we are the emotions rather than that's kind of an aspect of whatever it is that we're feeling and processing through, but we aren't actually the emotion itself. And it's that perception again of our idea of what we've been told about emotions and rejecting them. And quite often when we seek approval in our relationships, which is not what we consciously do, but subconsciously we do this because we want to be connected, we want to be included, we want to be loved or whatever, and other people's ideas will always be different from ours, but won't really always serve our highest good. No, nothing bad there, but it's just being aware of that, but also allowing that process to, you know, be okay with that and know that you're not going to be stuck in that emotion, but it's okay to have that emotion. And that regardless of whether people reject you or not, you're being you, authentic self. And that's often where depression really is questioned, because when we don't get to be authentic self, we become depressed because we feel we can't be who we want to be.
Yeah.
You know, and the other thing I wanted to touch on was that conversation you were talking about in the mind, the conflict, is in, I guess, philosophy in some ways. We explore archetypes. And what's most common in the mind when we're having this conflict is the judge, the rule keeper, versus what we call the victim child.
Yeah.
And these are more child archetypes that come from our childhood. And this is a normal part of our processing. They have to have this conversation of, well, you should be this, you should be that, you should be this, which is our programming. And then also our protection. And then you have the victim, which is just wanting to come out and express every avenue of what they're feeling. And quite often we can get from other people, oh, you're in your victim mode. And it's like, and then you make you feel bad for being in that. Well, I need to express something here. And if you're allowed to just do that for yourself without anybody's approval, there's the opening, you know? That self, we still look for approval, even though we know we don't need it.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. No, I was thinking about this like concept of approval today as well. And it's so like linked to other people and externally as opposed to ourselves. And I was really thinking to myself, like, why does it have to come from like someone else, or why does it have to come externally? But why do I like make myself believe that it has to come from someone else when I know it shouldn't? But it's also like changing that narrative in your head and like what story are you telling yourself that's going to help benefit you as opposed to how you think you should feel or how you think others should make you feel.
That's so much of the mind. There's so much mind chatter, I guess.
There is, yeah.
And I think it's always important to come back to the heart. You know, it sounds really cheesy when we say that, but the heart is the main functioning organ that does everything. You know, well, all organs are important, but the heart functions so much more in our emotional field and our mental field as well, because there is a communication between them. Yeah. This is what Greg Braden talks about as well. And if anybody's heard of heart math, which is a really beautiful thing that many people are involved in and teach with that connection through breath. And that's connecting to our central nervous system, autonomic nervous system, and our parasympathetic sphere, and knowing that we don't need others to create a safe place, or that we do actually have a safe place within. And I don't mean safe as in, everything's dangerous, but in the sense of like being okay with oneself exactly as we are, like every aspect, the flaws, the limitations, the negative chatter, the positive chatter, and all those other things in between. I think that's really important.
Yeah, definitely. And what like other challenges do you think arise when we're trying to get in touch with like our shadow selves, or like what kind of obstacles would people come across when they're embarking on this sort of spiritual journey?
Yeah. Again, it's probably the rule keeper.
Yeah.
And that will say, well, actually, no, it's all in your head. Everything's fine.
Mm.
And, we might talk to other people. I mean, for example, when I was going through my sickness, this was a few years ago, it was quite a serious issue. And people around me were like, no, you'll be fine. You'll be all right. We'll be all right. We'll be all right. And it limits you again to sort of then, oh, well, actually, no, I'm still going to go on. I want to do this exploration. I want to I want to do this, or I want to get up and meditate in the mornings. But we take personally other people's views and opinions, and we take them as our own beliefs, as we've just said. And that can come as an obstacle. And that, again, comes down to how much we want to change things for ourselves.
Yeah.
And we feel that there's, I guess, a risk, or we are nervous, or we don't feel as confident in taking that step to change.
Yeah.
And I guess that can only come with experience. And I think that's, that can be a block. Another one can be other sort of, I guess, physical obstacles, whatever you do in your day and your work, and it's easy to get absorbed and back in the rat race again.
Yeah.
And also complacency.
Yeah.
If you get stuck in a routine and never break out of it, or do one thing to change each week, or go somewhere different, and try to explore different avenues of, I don't know, exercise, or, go different places, or, going on holiday and things like that, just to break up the patterns of your day and also patterns of your mind.
Yeah. And like I was going to say, like we're talking a lot about like different things that you should do, strategies and practices, and, getting more in touch with yourself requires, I feel like, knowing what to do. Because I feel like there's a lot of times, I'm not explaining this very well at all, but
I get you.
No, there are a lot of times where I'm sitting with myself and I'm like, okay, I want to explore my thoughts more. I want to explore my feelings. I want to tap into like those deeper aspects of myself. But how do I do that? And that's often where you need someone to be like, okay, this is what you should do. Here's a practice. Here's a strategy. So I'd love to transition into our practices and habits section now and sort of apply what we've been talking about a bit more. But before we do that, I was wondering if you had like a personal story or an example of individuals who have transformed their fear into empowerment.
I think I'll use myself for the story, although there's many other stories I know as an example. But I have faced so many fears in my life. I mean, we're going to face fears day to day. Sometimes things will pop up that kind of, I guess, stop us in place. And then we have that kind of slight freeze mode, like, what do I do here?
Yeah.
And that's going to happen. And I think it's a question of the unknown. So I guess one point in my story was probably when I was really ill and unwell, and I was really scared in my life. And all I knew was to work and to just do what I did, just carry on, just do, and don't really connect with what I'm thinking and what my body's telling me.
Yeah.
And I guess that was in a way disempowering, but I didn't realize it at the time, but my body was telling me, which is why I just got really sick. So I did get the opportunity to reflect, especially in my recovery. And I had a fear to, I guess, I mean, it'd been a long road for me. It'd been a couple of years with my sickness in and out of hospital, and not really having, and we love our family and loved ones. And as I go back to connecting to the beginning of this session when we talked about our programming and conditioning, and I come from a culture where it's not really welcome or supported if you have sickness, or if there is something that is opposing to the main, I guess, ideas or rules even of how we should be, how we should live.
Yeah.
So I didn't express my true feelings. But when I had been sick and I came out of my sickness and I thought, wow, I'm And I'm not saying that this is what, everybody has to go through to have their awakening or whatever, but it just gave me a chance to really look and review why I felt the way that I felt and what my fears were about. Because my fears weren't exactly about being sick and I guess, my life, because I felt like it was someone else's hands, not in mine.
Yeah.
But I think what I felt was more, okay, I'm actually in a good place because not many people get this chance to stand back and have a look.
Yeah.
And I'm actually getting to review my life and change it. And when I realized that those fears were kind of more of other people's beliefs, and the only way that I had help doing that was really, I guess, I had that time out. And I felt a lot of movement in my spiritual essence. And when I talk about spirituality and emotional well-being, I don't want to, because spirituality can sound like going off woo-woo stuff, but it's not. It's just the whole essence of self. And I guess, like I talked about earlier, one dimension is just seeing things on the superficial surface.
Yeah.
But if you go beyond to the, extended dimensions, you're seeing every aspect of it and the possibilities that are and aren't. And I think knowing, for me, coming out of that, being really sick and my fears sort of, I guess, not necessarily transformed, but I think just having that realization, of who I was and what I was about and that life has meaning because, I nearly lost my life and then I got this second chance and I wanted to make it matter. So I think that was my driver.
Yeah.
So I think my mindset was, it's okay that I was scared and that I am scared now because I'm in the unknown. I don't know what's going to happen next. And I guess what I did for myself was it spurred something in me to learn about life. And when I started learning philosophy, I started exploring health avenues. I started exploring alternative medicine. And those learnings helped me expand all those aspects in my brain, whether it's I'm not really good with the whole brain parts, but cortex or whatever it is, I got that drive, that neuroplasticity to just keep learning. And that actually boosted me to understand the meaning of life and how fear can play a role in that. And I read this book called Big Magic. I think it's called Big Magic. I read it a long time ago. And it's about fear and how fear is a part of us. It's there for some sort of reason to drive something, to usually drive change.
Yeah.
But because we live in the culture we live in, and I was so used to being told, right, oh my God, if you're not on this path, then you must be doing something really wrong. And then that's the whole, I'm telling myself worse things. And then I fear those rules as well as the fear I have in general of this has happened to me. I don't know what I do. And feeling like it's not okay to, be anything other than happy. And then that rejection, understanding where those feelings come from, which is conditioning. But I read this book. Sorry to go back. I read this book and it was about, placing fear in the driving seat, which sometimes we do. And I think we give a lot of our power away to that and let it consume us. Because like I was talking before, we let emotions sometimes feel like they are us when they aren't. And when you start making that sort of like change of, well, actually perceiving it a different way, it's like, okay, it's actually giving me a bit of a drive. I just need it to sit in the back now and I'm just going to come back here because I want my life and I want to make these changes because I feel not quite happy where I am. Something doesn't feel right. I don't know the answer and I'm scared of what might be before me, but I'm going to take a chance because at the end of the day, we're living life for ourselves. And often we fear in our lives disconnection and rejection and isolation. But I think we forget that we are an individual. Yes, we're all connected. Yes, we all support each other. We're meant to be in this world together to support one another. But, we are living our lives for ourselves as well. And I think just figuring out what I wanted out of my life is really what helped me turn that aspect of myself that was scared and in the fear mode and I guess flight or freeze and flight mode, being nervous all the time to like, no, I'm going to take this because I'm here.
Yeah.
And then I started doing more breathing techniques to really help myself connect to my body and was just really listening to what my body was telling me. I didn't necessarily talk to someone straight away and I didn't necessarily, have counseling or anything like that. I just started expressing myself by body movement, breath work, and then, I'd wake up early in the morning, specifically before my partner woke up, and just have time, half an hour to myself to breathe and meditate.
Yeah.
And sometimes listen to music and just come back to myself. And I always found that my day kind of came together a lot more. So I guess in a way, I think we have this feeling that empowerment has to be, I'm going to go out there and I'm a warrior. But I think what I mean by empowerment is just really having further acknowledgement of self beyond what other people believe it to be. And even beyond all the philosophy we might learn and read and, and even when we talk about strategies, what we should use, I think it's really what personally relates to oneself. Everybody will be different what they connect with. So when we talk about strategies, I'll say there's a few things, but I think it's just so important to explore what makes you tick, what makes you ignite with passion for yourself.
Yeah.
And what makes you feel that, I guess, that love is that we forget that. I think we think love is like a thing with, I know, a physicality, but actually it's that inner essence of meaning of self. Like, what are we doing here? What's life about? What am I about? What's my purpose? Because I'm important and I'm worthy. And I think that for me, being able to target my limitations and knowing that they came from the culture that I come from, which loved to it, but it didn't work for me. And I realized that doesn't align for me. And once I've done that and set some boundaries, I was no longer afraid. Yeah. But it took a lot of guts to set those boundaries where my family of origin were concerned, for instance, and where culture was, to draw a line to just have my life back and do exactly what I wanted to do. And it was a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, certainly. And would you say there's like a specific practice that you recommend to cultivate your own belief system?
Again, it's so personal, so personal. And I don't want to be like just what we've talked about, provide limitations as to you've got to do this to be this. Not at all. And I think it starts with any type of connection to self. So yes, we want to explore, more of ourselves, but we might not get to exactly where we want just yet. And I think taking that journey there could start with doing something new for yourself, learning something new, whether it's reading a book, whether it's going on a course where you interact with other people. Like, for example, I was looking at making longbows, and you go out in nature and you make longbows and you connect with other people and you chat about life or whatever, and you're in a different surround. So nature is a really great connection just in any place, I guess, because the oxygen, the air we breathe, so any connection to nature. And we forget we're part of that as well. And I guess that's connecting to our whole spiritual essence, like who we are as a whole, which encompasses the physical, the mental, emotional, all those other aspects of us that we don't always get to explore. Yeah. And also journaling is really anything creative. And I don't mean creative as in always doing art to be creative, but you've been creative in the way you have your day plan, like creative in the sense of, I don't know, I'm going to make 20 minutes, I'm going to wake up early and I'm going to go, I don't know, jog somewhere, or I'm going to, I don't know, do some research on something, or there might be something new that you join a group online. I think it's just connecting to something different to explore, and you won't know what avenue that's going to work for you unless you try an avenue. Yeah. And the other thing is also, as a suggestion or an idea, is I guess breath work to connect it to, I guess, our nervous system a lot more, because a lot of our limitations can come through how we breathe. We have a lot of breathing dysfunction in our society, in our world, especially the modern world. Yeah. And that can cause a lot of stress, and then we're in the fight or flight mode, or we freeze mode, and then all the defense muscles are working, and then we're not functioning properly and we can't make decisions properly. Yeah. So anything to regulate with breath and movement. So we're connecting mind with body again is a really important tool, I think. Definitely.
I find that like breathing has become such a massive thing in this day and age. And a lot of people don't know how to breathe, including myself.
Yeah. I'm still learning.
I mean, yes, I know how to breathe, like to keep myself alive, but like I don't actually know how to use my breath as a way to tap into myself, or like explore more of my thoughts, regulate my emotions, and, anything that arises. And it can be really powerful to learn how to do that.
Absolutely. And that kind of touches on a little bit of, I mean, it's probably on a different level, but some of Wim Hof's work, which, comes from a lot of his own trauma experiences and things, but being able to just come back into yourself to be able to, I guess, not have to react and respond to situations at all and have this effortless flow of organically knowing what to do or how to process emotions in a much more kind of, I guess, efficient, kind of healthy way.
Yeah.
But then there's no right or wrong though as well. So
wouldn't that be amazing if something bad came up and we're like, okay, just breathe through it.
It's not always going to be realistic.
I wish like I'm going through a period of grief, just breathe through it. That would be lovely. I feel like I'd start hyperventilating.
Yeah.
Honestly. Yeah.
I think it's just, like I say, it's one of those things where we start to explore what helps us come back to self for a start.
Yeah.
But also being able to accept, okay, this is where I am and I don't know what to do and that's okay. Yeah. Or I'm scared and that's okay. Or I'm angry and that's okay.
Yeah.
And not reject those other aspects of us, because then that's where the fear starts to take over and we reject ourselves, which then causes discomfort and depression.
100%. Yeah. And how would you say this sort of practice of breathing that we've been talking about helps our perception in life?
I guess. It's just like there's no easy answer. It's such a big exploration.
Yeah.
And there's so many other, I mean, and I don't want people to be listening to this thinking, oh God, she thinks breathing's the answer to stuff. Not at all. No, I think it's a step, but then we keep taking steps to work towards things. And I think it's important to find a healthy community to connect with, because they have so many learnings and experiences that they share. I mean, like Brené Brown, for instance, is a great one because she talks about real life stories and everyday situations when we are like, oh my God, how do I deal with this? And then just how we process that. And she simplifies it, because I think we overcomplicate and this sounds really bad, doesn't it, actually? But we do tend to overthink and overcomplicate what we should and shouldn't do. And I think instead of just kind of sometimes really being present. And I guess when I mean doing the breathing and movement is just finding a way to be present to begin with. And then once you start being present, you're able to then access things that could give you more for what you're looking for. And we're not always going to have the answers. We're not always going to know what's in front of us. We can have our life goal. But one of my teachers used this example, because we can be attached to an outcome. I'll be brief with this.
Yeah.
We have an outcome and we want to reach this outcome, whatever this goal is. For example, I'll just make this simple. So a place we want to go and it's a long journey. We're in our car. However, it's foggy.
Yeah.
So we can't see, we know where we want to go, but we can't actually see it yet. And all we can see is a few meters in front of us. And the only way that we're going to be able to keep going is if we just move the car, drive it bit by bit. Then we see more of ahead, then we see more ahead, then we see more ahead.
Yeah.
It might be a different route that we take. We might take a left turn that we didn't plan to make, but we're still on the way. It's like the Great Labyrinth, it's not a maze because there's no blocks. However, it's a meandering route. And we're just taking that way to get to where we want to go. And I think it's just allowing ourselves to be excited about that, because we always feel, and this come back to conditioning, that there's a straight line between A and B, which there just isn't. And there isn't any black and whiteness to everything. There's a grey area, massive grey area.
Yeah.
And we're always looking for answers. And I think when we stop looking for answers and just stand back and start to just have a look at where we are and see the view, everything starts to change a little bit more, I think. And also knowing that, whatever feeling we are feeling, that we do sometimes get absorbed in, because we are human. I mean, I make mistakes all the time. It's what makes us wise.
Yeah.
We cannot live in perfection. This is the ideals we've been given of living independently, just getting on with it, don't complain, just be happy all the time. And that's what's become toxic.
Yeah.
And I think it's just having a look back, does this align for me? No. And you can choose to put that to one side and just do as you're doing, have a look at the view and assess where you want to be.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that thing you mentioned of like, we're always looking for answers.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you just step back, you'll see more than when you are going after those answers. Because going back to this whole thing of like the universe has a plan and it's always in motion, I feel like when you go after your answers and you chase after something, you're never going to find what you want, or it's
too much
just
pressure.
Exactly. And it's going to make you more confused, and you're not actually going in the direction that you're supposed to. You just think you are. But if you take a step back, if you let yourself feel the emotions and the thoughts and know that it's all in passing, that you're going to find that answer and it's going to come to you, as opposed to you always having to go seek it out because you're done feeling a certain way or done thinking these thoughts. You can't rush the process.
Exactly. I think it's that pressure that we get. And even from, people who are great for us and have a positive influence, maybe we feel pressure from them that they have to do these, I don't know, spiritual things or whatever things to be on the right path. Not at all. I think it's just blending together your own recipe of what works for you from wherever you choose to take it from.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for sharing. No, that was so great. I love deep diving into like thoughts and emotions. It's so interesting, and I could honestly talk about it forever.
It's a really big topic, and I think that's why I felt a bit like, nervous of bringing everything together to encompass within the hour or the time that we had together, because there's such a huge exploration. But I think it's just only the tip of the iceberg. And I think if we look at the mind as an iceberg, and you've got the top bit, which is just a little bit, and then you've got underneath the water this massive part of the iceberg. That's the subconscious. That's the rest of us that we don't always get to look at. And that's where we access our immune system and our programming and all the strength of us much further deep down. And there's so many avenues to access that.
100%.
It's probably a topic for another date.
No, there's so many like little subtopics in this massive topic we've been talking about. And I guess overarchingly, I don't know. We were talking about resilience, and transforming fear into empowerment is a huge process. And like you were talking about, it's about, steps, and it's not just this one step you take. You're going to have to keep taking steps until you build up, a solid pace. And it's so interesting that you have to tap into like your emotions and thoughts, learn how to deal with them and learn how to move through them to be able to, turn fear into empowerment.
I just wanted to add there, because it can sound like, again, putting pressure on ourselves that we have to take so many steps. Not at all. I think it's just knowing that throughout our whole life, we will just keep taking a step up. Whatever that beautiful life mountain is, and enjoying the view each step of the way. And knowing that it's not going to be easy, because, even the most toughest journeys, they lead to the most beautiful and empowering spaces. But I think it's just knowing that I'm supposed to be taking one step at a time. And I can't run to the end, because otherwise, I'm not going to enjoy my life.
Exactly. And I guess it's like walking, like you have to walk to get places.
Yeah, exactly.
And like you don't, well, obviously.
I know what you mean though. You're taking your time to go to where you're going to and enjoy the walk on the way you find and explore different things, and you meet your friends,
Exactly. It's like when you want to go to a destination, you pop it in on maps. There are like all the different options. Do you want to take tolls? Do you not want to take tolls? Do you want to walk there? Do you want to ride your bike there? Like, do you want to walk? Like there are so many different parts to getting to a place, but you'll get there in the end. It's just about what type of journey do you want to take there, and you have control in that, in the mode you want to take and everything.
I think we forget that we have that power, that resilience to make those decisions, because quite often we give our power away to others. Not intentionally.
Never intentionally. No.
But I think it's just reminding ourselves, well, I matter. And I'm here. And I want to have the life that I want to have, and whether that looks how I want it to now or it doesn't, I'm going to explore those avenues. And you're not going to know what they are until you start exploring. You might like some things, you might not like some things, but that's the taste, tasting different meals, I guess, each day, and finding which one is the most delicious for you, I guess.
Exactly. And it's so scary, and I know talking about all of this can be so scary, because like being a kid, you're like la la la, like there's nothing to worry about, like life is great, my parents do everything for me, I just have to go to school and talk to my friends and that's it. And then you suddenly grow up and you're like, wow, there's so much to deal with, like you make new friends, you lose friends, you get into a relationship, you break up, like you do all these different things, and like they teach you so much, and you're just, when you think you've learned everything you could possibly learn, life throws you something else and you're like, wow, there's another form of grief out there.
Yeah.
And
I think also, many people, I mean, this happened to my daughter recently as a small short story, but she experienced some, an unfortunate situation at her kinder. And, me and her father were upset with how the kinder practice actually dealt with it, because they did what was, remember we talked about black and white, the codes, their protocol of what worked for the practice itself, which is great, However, the emotional aspect for my daughter was still causing her a lot of grief, and then turned into anxiety. And what happened with that was, we're coming back to the center and saying, she's actually saying this to us at home, and she's presenting anxiety. She's saying this, and this to us, because she obviously felt safe to tell us that, and that made me feel good that as a parent, my daughter feels safe to tell me how she feels, which is not an easy thing for a 5-year-old to do. She's only 5. But the center said, she's not presenting anxiety. So I'm like, well, okay, but she's still coming home and all these things are happening and she's just not herself. That's the question when you're not yourself and you've got other people looking out for you. And hopefully all of us do, but not all of us do have someone looking out for us, is noticing that and wanting to explore that. And the issue came down to their idea of what anxiety looks like. So this is another obstacle that adds to the process of things that other people don't understand, or other systems don't understand what feelings will look like. They look different for everyone.
Yeah.
Everybody's story and associations and triggers and traumas are completely individual.
Yeah.
And I think there's a judgment on, for example, she's not off crying in the corner over there sulking. But that doesn't mean she's not got anxiety. Anxiety comes up in other ways, and I think it's just the ideas that we have of what emotions should look like. Again, we're putting limitations on their expression. And I think it's really important to know that whatever you are feeling in the way that you express it is completely valid, whether others say it is or not. We don't need their approval because they don't know you and they're not you,
Yeah.
Or they might know you, but they don't understand what might not know exactly everything you've been through. But if you're saying something and feeling something, it's completely valid in itself,
Yeah, like one size doesn't fit all. And
yes, exactly.
I guess that should be a main takeaway from all of this, is like your process of turning fear into empowerment, or understanding your emotions, and like your thoughts are going to be different from how someone else is going to do that. The steps you take in your life are going to look different to someone else's steps.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's okay.
That is absolutely okay. And it's also knowing that, whatever we are feeling, if it's unpleasant, it's temporary.
Yeah.
And it's part of a healthy process. And, healthy processes are ugly, yucky, dark, cold.
Yeah.
But, it's part of where we go through to come out the other end and be doing something different. And that's what it's there for, to make those small changes in our lives to have a better experience.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think that's the perfect way to round off today. So I just want to say thank you so much, Violet, for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Again, and talking to us about this topic. And it's so deep, and there are so many avenues we can take to talk about it, and we could talk about it forever.
Probably all day.
Yeah, honestly, to try and uncover it. But I feel like even after those hours, we'd still have so much more to say. But thank you for doing this with me. And creating like a space where people know it's safe and it's normal and it's okay to go through all of these things and have it be their own journey and not have to look, the same as, their friend or whoever.
Yeah. I think we definitely need to normalize so many of the things that we've rejected in society that's, taboo.
Definitely.
There's nothing that's taboo. Really.
Yeah. I 100% agree. And for those of us who want to find out a bit more about your work, where can we go?
We can go to my website, goldenviolet333.com, or you can find me on Instagram as well, the sort of similar address, goldenviolet333.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for that. And to everyone listening, if you missed that, don't worry, it's down in the description below. And we'll see you guys next time. You have been listening to Bouncing Back, the Personal Resilience Science Insights podcast produced by the Life Management Science Labs. Listen to episodes from LMSL's 10 Life Management Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or other podcasting apps on your smartphone. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it and us grow to bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website, pr.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Joanna. Thanks for tuning in.